Welcome to Sacred Stories. Today, we will explore one of the most powerful and transformative commandments in the Bible. The Great Commandment, given by Jesus, calls us to a life of unconditional love and sacrifice. How do we love God with all our heart and our neighbor as ourselves? This story has the power to change the way we live, love, and serve. The story of the Great Commandment begins in the New Testament, in Matthew 22 verses 34 to 40. The Pharisees, always trying to trap Jesus in his words, asked him what the greatest commandment in the law was. They wanted a simple answer, but Jesus' response was deep and transformative. Jesus answered without hesitation, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments." Loving God with all our heart, soul, and mind is not an easy task, but it is a fundamental calling. When Jesus speaks of the heart, he refers to our deepest affection. He wants our love for him to be sincere and full of devotion. Loving God with all our soul means giving our lives in his service, striving to live according to his teachings. Scene of someone praying in a quiet place. This love is not just about words or rituals. It is lived out every day, in our choices, in our faith. It is a love reflected in every action and every moment. Jesus teaches us that true worship is when we give our best to him. The second commandment is equally crucial, love your neighbor as yourself. This is not about superficial or occasional love. Jesus teaches that we should treat our neighbor with the same care, compassion, and respect we have for ourselves. Scene showing people in various situations helping others, a man giving shelter to a homeless person, a friend listening to another in need. Love for our neighbor is not limited to friends, but extends even to our enemies. In Matthew 5 verse 44, Jesus says, "Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." This is a love that challenges all expectations and compels us to act with kindness, even in difficult situations. In Luke 10 verses 30 to 37, Jesus tells the parable of the Good Samaritan. He speaks of a man who was attacked by robbers and left nearly dead by the side of the road. A priest and a Levite, passing by, ignored the wounded man. But a Samaritan, considered an enemy by the Jews, approached, cared for him, and took him to an inn. Scene of the Samaritan tending to the man's wounds and paying for his stay. Jesus used this parable to illustrate what it truly means to love our neighbor. The Samaritan did not care about the race, religion, or social status of the wounded man. He simply saw someone in need and acted with compassion. Jesus shows us that when we love our neighbor, we are reflecting God's love for us. In 1 John 4 verses 7 to 8, we read, "Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love." Scene showing a father and daughter playing together, transmitting joy and love. Love for our neighbor is not just a commandment, but a reflection of God's very nature. He is love, and by loving others, we become more like him. Living the Great Commandment is not something we do just on Sundays. It must be lived in every action, in every choice. From small gestures to big decisions, when we love God and others, our life becomes a reflection of his character. This means caring for those around us, being present for those in need, showing patience and grace, and forgiving those who have hurt us. God's love is active, and he calls us to be his hands and feet in the world. Loving our neighbor is not just easy when we are with those we love, but also when we face our enemies. In Matthew 5 verse 44, Jesus challenges his followers, "Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." This commandment goes beyond mere tolerance. It calls us to practice love at a deep level, even for those who harm us. It's easy to love those who love us, but the true challenge is to show grace and kindness to those who reject or hurt us. By doing so, we reflect the heart of God, who loves without expecting anything in return. Loving our neighbor is not just easy when we are with those we love, but also when we face our enemies. In Matthew 5 verse 44, Jesus challenges his followers, "Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." This commandment goes beyond mere tolerance. It calls us to practice love at a deep level, even for those who harm us. It's easy to love those who love us, but the true challenge is to show grace and kindness to those who reject or hurt us. By doing so, we reflect the heart of God, who loves without expecting anything in return. There is a paradox in the commandment to love unconditionally. When we give our love without expecting anything in return, we receive more than we could ever imagine. In Acts 20 verse 35, Paul says, "It is more blessed to give than to receive." Unconditional love is the key to true inner peace because it frees us from selfishness and the need for rewards. Scene of a mother hugging her child, a simple yet profound moment of love. This love that we give to others without expectations draws us closer to God and teaches us that our satisfaction and joy come not from what we receive, but from what we offer to others. The love that transforms. Love, when lived out genuinely, has the power to transform not only individuals but entire communities. In John 13 verse 35, Jesus teaches us, "By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another." The world recognizes Christ in us when we reflect his love in our actions. This kind of love is not something we can manufacture by our own strength. It comes from God, and by living it, we become a light in the world. The love we receive from God must be the foundation of all our interactions with others. The love that heals and sets free. Love has the power to heal. In 1 Corinthians 13 verses 4 to 7, Paul describes love as patient, kind, bearing all things, and believing all things. This kind of love can heal deep wounds and restore broken relationships. When we love as Christ loved us, we offer the healing that only he can provide. In our lives, we can be witnesses to the power of this love. Whether by forgiving, offering words of encouragement, or extending a helping hand, love is the key to true freedom, for it breaks the chains of hatred and resentment. The love that reaches everyone. The love Jesus calls us to live knows no boundaries. It does not recognize cultural, racial, or economic barriers. In Galatians 3 verse 28, Paul reminds us that in Christ, there is neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female. We are all one in Christ, and God's love extends to everyone without exception. This love is inclusive and calls us to go beyond our own limitations and prejudices, to reach and serve those in need, no matter who they are or where they come from. Loving our neighbor, according to Jesus' commandment, means extending a hand to all, without exception. Love that overcomes fear. The love that God teaches us not only transforms lives but also overcomes fear. In 1 John 4 verse 18, we read, "There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear." Fear often holds us back from loving fully, fear of rejection, suffering, or the unknown. But when we surrender to God's love, we find the courage to love without hesitation. When we love with the love of Christ, we realize that he is enough. We don't have to fear loneliness, disappointment, or hardships, because his love sustains and strengthens us. Love as a testimony. Love is not just a commandment, it is also a mark of true followers of Christ. In John 13 verse 35, Jesus declares, "By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." When we live out this love, we become a living testimony of the gospel. It's not just words that demonstrate our faith, but the way we love and serve. A heart filled with God's love becomes a channel of transformation in the lives of others. Love as the answer to hatred. We live in a world where hatred, division, and prejudice are common. But true love calls us to a different path. Jesus taught us to love even those who persecute and harm us. The love that God gives us is not just for easy times. It shines even brighter when chosen in the midst of darkness. When we choose to love instead of hate, we are bringing God's kingdom to this world. Love that transcends time. Love is not temporary. It transcends generations, leaving a legacy that cannot be erased. In 1 Corinthians 13 verse 13, Paul declares, and now these three remain: faith, hope and love. But the greatest of these is love. God's love is eternal. It does not depend on circumstances or fleeting emotions. When we choose to live out this love, we are investing in something that will never be lost, something that will echo into eternity. The call to love. The greatest commandment is not just a beautiful ideal. It is a calling, a way of life, a daily commitment. Loving God with all our heart and loving our neighbor as ourselves is the essence of the Christian life. And now, the question remains, how can you live out this love today? In your home, at work, in your community? The love that God gives us is not meant to be kept, it must be shared. Because when we choose to love, we bring light to a dark world. May this love guide your steps, transform your relationships, and draw you closer to the heart of God. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Sacred Stories. May God bless you, and see you in the next video.